This is Becoming a Household Name, and I'm the host, Jody J. Sperling. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a variety of things. I want to start out with a fun conversation I had with a former guest on the podcast. I was out in Madison selling my books, Madison, Wisconsin. It was a fun time. I had some really delicious $10 aged sharp white cheddar on Sunday. And yeah, it was super duper tasty. Can't complain. Didn't sell the most books ever, but I met some cool new readers and had some fantastic conversations. I'm going to count it as a win overall. But I have been thinking a lot these past couple weeks about what it takes to become a household name. And this former guest of mine, her name is Dr. Sheena Howard. She has a handful of different books that you might love, whether you enjoy fiction or nonfiction. She also helps coach people on social media, especially Instagram, and her account has grown massively over the last year. So she's very much an authority on the subject. You can always reach out to her if you're interested in learning about that. She reached out and said, what does it mean to you to be a household name? And had said that in a previous episode, I mentioned a few authors that she wasn't familiar with. And I thought about it a little bit at the time. I was busy at the show, so I didn't give it as much thought as I have since. But to me, a household name, and this is what I think I've said over and over in each episode, is being mentioned in the same breath as someone like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. Those are the kind of people that everybody knows. And that is what I am chasing after, as delusional as it sounds. And it does sound delusional. It sounds crazy to me when I think about my goal and the size of an accomplishment that would be. I've also recorded some episodes not too long ago where I said, would I be willing to trade in the time that I have with my family, the time that I have at the lakes, what I would consider to be non-productive in the strictest sense of I'm not writing a book, I'm not recording a podcast, I'm not creating social media content. The question I have for myself is, how often am I actively involved in creating things even when I am in non-productive time? And plenty of you out there are probably familiar with the way that stories come to you when you are not necessarily looking for them, but when you're open to them. So it's difficult to say what non-productive time is really like. Do you get the job done when you need to? And it's been funny to me that lately, as I've been writing, I have gotten a handful of comments from a number of different people who are like, wow, you're really pumping out the books. So if I write fast, I get criticized for writing too fast. And if I write slow, then I'm not doing enough to move my career forward. It's a strange dilemma. It seems like there's not a lot you can do right. I want to be a household name, and I want to create great books. And I want every book that I publish to be a great book, something that people will read and that rereaders will reread, that will be talked about and loved. And I want it to be connected to my name. I think about Stephen King, and I think about brand, conversations I've had with guys like Thomas J. Beleza, who's a 3-time guest on this podcast. If there's a brand for Stephen King, people have called him the king of horror, but I don't think of him that way. In fact, I don't think of him as being a horror novelist. I have read some of his horror work. I've liked it. I have read some of his fantasy work. I have liked it. I have read some of his literary work. I have liked it. His speculative, his urban fantasy, all the different things he's doing. I think of Stephen King as my favorite living author. And I think similarly of J.K. Rowling. Now, the world has pressed some titles on her and has claimed that she hates transgender people. And those things are in my consciousness, but they don't define her to me. And so the question of brand is strange. I just want people to talk about my books and be like, wow, The 9 Lives of Marva DeLonghi is an amazing read. And that whole series is so much fun. Wow, Kidnapping George Clooney is so creative and so silly and fun. Buckshot Blast and The Goldfish Getaway, couldn't stop reading that book. That's the way that I want people to talk about me. I don't really care whether they approve of my lifestyle choices, the people that I interact with, my friends, my wife, my kids. I don't care if they like me, if I'm attractive, none of those things. I care that people like my stories and come back for more. And then from the very practical perspective, I want my stories to make me a living and maybe a little bit extra on top. I think about all of the things that have to go right for those kind of things to happen. And so that's the main thing that I want to talk about today is the magic bullet. And I was preparing my thoughts this morning before I started recording. You've heard the phrase before, there's no such thing as a magic bullet. I think that the reality is the people who say that have either achieved success, how hard they had to work, or they're people who have never achieved success and now believe that luck is the only thing that drives success or failure. When I think the truth is, the harder you work, the more likely it is that you're going to stumble into the magic bullet. I've quoted this and I always butcher it a little bit, but the idea is success is when preparation meets opportunity. The more that you are preparing, the more opportunities you're going to encounter. And the more opportunities you encounter, the more times that you're going to experience success. You may knock on a lot of doors that never get opened or answered. You may knock on some doors that are answered, and the answer is no, thank you, not interested. And you just have to keep your head above water, or you have to keep knocking on the next door. You have to keep doing the next thing. What happens, what it comes down to, and the reason that there is a magic bullet is that it only takes one person. It only takes the right person at the right time to create the right moment. If you go to a comic expo like I have, and you have a great interaction with somebody who's excited to read your book, and they go home and they read it and they love it, that person may have an audience of 2 million people on social media. They may throw up a video and be like, hey, I met this author yesterday, bought his book, it's amazing. Bingo, bango, boongo. You sell a whole crap ton of books all of a sudden because that one person recommended you, and suddenly things start to take off. If Oprah Winfrey asks you to include your book in her book club, if Reese Witherspoon asks to include your book in her book club, if Steven Spielberg options your book for a movie, there are all kinds of different things that can happen. I was friends with a past podcast guest here, Lena Krell, and one of her short stories was optioned by Jordan Peele, and that led to a serious book contract with one of the big five. I don't know that she's capitalized on a whole ton, but she also had another one of her works optioned by Zoe Kravitz. And so she's had 2 works that have kind of moved into the public eye. She's going to be able to capitalize on that. And that was a magic bullet moment. We all had stories floating out there. Why did Jordan Peele find hers? She told a little bit of that story in the episode. She had a friend, and this one person was going to go out to Los Angeles and start pitching stories to see if they could get anything made into a film. And so that friend carried her message, moved it on to somebody who could act, and all of a sudden, dominoes are falling all over the place. Does Lena work harder than you do? Does she work harder than I do? I can confidently say, based on the interview I had with her, that she does not. She's not doing more than I am. She's not posting on social media. She's not doing a podcast. She's not writing multiple books a year. And that's not a criticism. That's just a reality that some people won't work as hard as you do, and they will still find the magic bullet. Because the magic bullet is not something that is a consequence of doing. The magic bullet is a moment in time, and you can't help it. But what you can do is continue to work. I can't even promise you that you will ever find the magic bullet. And so maybe the reality of the situation is that you have to work for something other than becoming a household name. I say that like I just discovered it, because kind of I did. Nobody can promise me success. Nobody can promise me that my book is going to fall into the right hands. Taking a little sip of a drink. Coffee, iced coffee, non-alcoholic. That's how I roll these days. Have for quite a while. I still celebrate people drinking. I see my wife get after it some evenings. A little kindling of jealousy, but mostly I just enjoy that she's having a good time. She's responsible. Moving right along. The magic bullet is not something that you can make your house more appealing for so that it'll knock on your door, but it's out there circulating, bumping into people, changing lives, moving along. I'm thinking a lot about manifesting and that as a part of the magic bullet. And all I can say is I've never really been very good at the whole idea of manifesting, the power of positivity, those kind of things. And I have a weird relationship to it at this moment in time, because I think actions speak louder than words. That's a aphorism that's thrown around all the time, a cliched phrase that's tossed about. Actions speak louder than words. If that's true, then the fact that I write every day, the fact that I'm consistent with the podcast, the fact that I am making content on social media, the fact that I'm constantly working on this, those actions should speak to the optimism that actually drives me and not the thoughts. Because let me tell you something, my thoughts are a dirty place. I'd love to get Dr. Tara Swart-Bieber on this podcast. I've been working with her for a long time. She keeps telling me it's inevitable, but not yet. So she will be on the podcast. And I'd love to talk with her about a person like me who my actions prove that at the deepest level, I believe in myself, but whose thoughts about what's happening in my life, what is bound to come, the future of my life, those things are in dissonance. They are in disorder with my actions, because even today, I knew I needed to get the podcast recorded. And yet there was a big part of me that was like, I don't want to. What's the point? When I write a book lately, I have those thoughts a lot. Why am I doing this? Nobody's really reading them. They talk about having a series. And when I say they, people who created the AMO program, Steve Piper, namely, will talk about the more books you have in a book deal, the easier it is to be profitable when you advertise. But outside of advertising book deals on Facebook, on Meta, Instagram, outside of that, book deals or future books in the series can be challenging, because you're oftentimes going to sell the first book in a series and somebody's going to see whether they like it. It takes a certain kind of person to be like, yeah, I'll dive in and buy all 4 of the books that you currently have published in the series. That's a level of confidence that they're going to like it. And great, if you build your pitch, we've talked about this, go back and listen to the episodes on building pitches. We've done multiples of them. That's fantastic. You're going to do better if you're better at pitching, but still generally you're going to sell probably 5 to 1 of a single book deal. So having series can slow you down in some ways, because it'll take up space on your table. It's going to take up inventory that's not going to move as fast. We're talking like practical, and that's just the case. However, get a reader locked in, sell them the first book in the series. They love it. Maybe they come back and buy the second book. Maybe they come back and buy the third book, the fourth book. You're not going to have a whole ton of turnover when people get locked into a series. And that can be a really nice way to build a relationship and get people continuing forward. It's difficult. It's difficult still to put the words down on the page, knowing that you're not going to get a massive amount of positive response to a new book in a series like you would the early book or a standalone book. There's also belief among some people that series are never good and that they get weaker as they go. I haven't found that to be the case. I'm reading the Dresden Files series, and I think those books, if anything, get better as they go. You get to know the characters, you like them, the stories get better, the characterizations get better. Jim Butcher, has become much better at writing as he's gone along. The way he constructs the stories, his prose, it's all getting cleaner, better, more forceful, more innovative. I'm a big fan. I like series. J.K. Rowling's Cormorant series, or Cormorant Strike series, is another example of a phenomenal character who gets better and better. The most recent book in that series, The Running Grave, is breathtaking. It's one of my favorite books ever. It's so very good. The Harry Potter series, fantastic. The Dark Tower series, fantastic. Stephen King also writes a lot of one-offs, and those books are amazing. The Stand, like I said, Cujo. I'm actually not as big of a fan of The Shining, though I did really, really like Dr. Sleep. So, great books, great standalone. Keep doing the work. And if it's fate that the magic bullet should arrive, be prepared for it. The worst thing I can imagine is being visited by the magic bullet and having nothing to offer? What if you had your one opportunity? What if you were going out with your significant other for a dinner and you sat at a table next to a person you knew could change your life, but you had nothing to offer? What if you were out and about and a person stopped you and asked you what you did, and that person could change your life, but you're like, oh, I used to write books, but I don't anymore. It got too hard. It got too difficult. Imagine the moment coming to you and you not being prepared. I can't think of anything that would be more soul crushing. Eminem, very popular for saying, you only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. If I quote any more lines, maybe I'll be sued. As long as you mention me by name and at least one book title, Marshall, then I am glad for you to sue me. Just make sure that you mention my stuff. Any publicity, any attention is good attention. It's been several weeks that I've been struggling with depression. It's kind of rare for me. I've got that personal details in my life that are very much front of my mind. But also just the reality that it feels like a lot of the same without very much movement. I don't see how to get to the next step. I don't know how to move things forward. I don't know how to generate daily sales on Amazon. I don't know how to generate daily sales through my website. If I start advertising again, I don't know how to be profitable doing it. I'm kind of at a crossroads where I have seemingly no good roads forward. So writing the book and then creating a lot of organic social media. And every time I post something organically, I think this will be the one. And then Instagram shows it to 23 people, 80% of those whom are my followers. And it dies a slow and painful death. C'est la vie, as they say. You keep doing it, you hope to get better. And the reality is the more you create, the better you get at what you do. So just keep doing that, because that is your preparation. The moment may come, it might not look like what you expected it to look like, but you will be an overnight success. Let's say 20 years in the making right now. And maybe if I'm talking to you in another 10 years, I'll be waiting to be an overnight success 30 years in the making. We just don't know. Come again next week and the week after that for similarly uplifting messages. I hope that you are feeling light and free and airy. I hope everything in your life is fantastic. I hope whatever art you are creating, whatever book you are writing, whatever you are doing, that you want to be a household name and known for doing, that it comes to you with utter ease, joy, blissfulness. And I hope that you have an inner tenacity that will not allow you to quit. Becoming a household name won't happen overnight, but with your help, it can happen for me or for anyone you know who's on this journey. If you liked what you heard today, would you consider sharing this podcast with someone you know would love it too? Word of mouth is the single biggest difference maker for a dreamer's outcome. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.